A little girl, barely 6 years old, was living on the streets, scavenging through trash bags and sleeping under cardboard boxes. That frigid morning, while searching for scraps behind a closed diner, she found a man collapsed amongst the garbage bags, motionless, pale, and with a scraped-up face. What happened next would forever change both of their destinies. Subscribe to the channel for stories that touch your heart every day. The millionaire gazed at the city from his glass penthouse high above. Down below, the people looked like ants following their predetermined paths, insignificant under the weight of the grey sky. His fingers drummed on the black marble desk as he reviewed the quarterly financial reports. Numbers, always numbers. That's what his life had become in the last 6 years, an endless succession of numbers, meetings, and cold decisions that affected thousands of lives without him needing to look into a single person's eyes. The coffee, served at the precise temperature, remained untouched at his side. The impeccable suit, custom-made in Savile Row, London, sat on his body like armor. Nothing was out of place in his meticulously controlled world. Not even an emotion. "Sir, the shareholders' meeting has been moved up to 2 p.m., his assistant informed him over the intercom. "Cancel it," he replied without taking his eyes off the window. "I'm going out." A confused silence followed on the other end of the line. In 6 years, he had never cancelled a shareholders' meeting. As his personal driver waited for him in the garage, the millionaire descended alone in the panoramic elevator. He felt a restlessness he couldn't name, a strange feeling that something was about to shatter the glass and steel dome he had built around himself. Miles away, in a narrow alley behind upscale restaurants, the girl woke up curled inside a cardboard. Bugul, her 6 years of life, carried the hardness of someone who already knew too much about the world's cruelty. Her small, dirty fingers clutched a tattered blanket, the only reminder of a past she could barely recall. The biting morning cold made her bones ache, but she was used to it. She got up and shook out her large, dirty clothes, gathering the little dignity she possessed. It was time to look for something to eat. Moving like a ghost through the alleys, the girl knew every dumpster, every time the restaurants discarded food that was still usable. Her eyes, large and watchful, held a sharp intelligence and a distrust that children her age shouldn't know. That morning, something was different. The silence was deeper in the alley behind the Italian restaurant that usually discarded pasta and bread at dawn. As she approached the dumpsters, she saw an unusual shape amongst the garbage bags. It was a man. He was lying on his side, his face pale and scratched, his breathing almost imperceptible. His expensive suit was stained and torn, and a trickle of blood ran from his forehead. The girl hesitated. Adults always meant danger, but something in the man's fragility awakened a compassion in her that she didn't even know she possessed. She approached cautiously, balancing between fear and curiosity. Mister, wake up," she whispered, touching his shoulder lightly with her small, dirty fingers. There was no response, only a low groan that confirmed there was still life in that body. The girl looked around, desperate. No one passed by there at that hour, no one who cared about a fallen man or a street child. Then something happened, something that would change the course of 2 lives forever. The girl decided that, even if the world had never done anything for her, she would do something for that stranger. With determination, she ran to the main street where a drugstore was just opening its doors. The clerk shouted when she saw the small, dirty figure trying to enter the store, but the girl was not intimidated. "There's a man dying in the alley. Please call for help," she cried, with all the strength her small lungs allowed. At first, no one believed her. But there was so much urgency in her eyes, so much truth in her despair, that finally someone decided to check. And so, while the ambulance was being called, the girl disappeared again into the shadows of the city, not knowing that she had just saved not only a life, but also the heart of someone who had long forgotten what it was like to feel. The Millionaire's eyes opened to a white, sterile ceiling. The smell of disinfectant invaded his nostrils, and the constant beeping of machines beside him confirmed where he was. Hospital. The word formed in his mind like a riddle. How had he gotten there? Fragments of memory returned slowly. The impulsive decision to dismiss the driver and walk through the city, the suffocating feeling inside the suit. And then the attack. 3 men, a dark alley, the blow to the head. After that, only darkness. "You were lucky," said a doctor, noticing he was awake. "If it weren't for the little girl who asked for help, you might not have survived the hypothermia and concussion." Little girl? The millionaire forced the words out, feeling his throat scratch. "Yes, a street kid. From what I understand, she found you amongst the garbage bags and ran to call for help. No one would have looked in that alley before noon when the restaurants open." Something strange happened inside the millionaire's chest. A forgotten sensation, like an atrophied muscle that is suddenly forced to move. Gratitude. No, it was more than that. It was the realization that his life, a life he had turned into numbers and assets, had been saved by someone who possessed nothing. "Where is she?" he asked, trying to sit up in bed. Social services took her to the city shelter. Apparently, she was already known in the area. She's been living on the streets for at least 2 years, from what they could gather. The millionaire closed his eyes, feeling a pain that didn't come from his physical injuries. 2 years on the streets, a child. The same age his daughter would have been if... "I want to see her," he declared, in the same voice he used to close multi-million-dollar deals. It wasn't a request, it was an order. The doctor hesitated. "Sir, the shelter has procedures." "We can't just make the necessary arrangements," interrupted the millionaire. "I'll pay whatever it takes." 3 days later, still against medical advice, the millionaire entered the city shelter. The contrast with his world couldn't be more stark. Peeling walls, worn furniture, the smell of institutional food in the air, and children, dozens of them with looks that alternated between hope and resignation. The director of the shelter, a middle-aged woman with tired but kind eyes, led him to a small room. "She doesn't talk much," the woman explained. "In fact, since she got here, she's barely said a word. We only know her name because she'd been through the system before." The millionaire nodded, feeling strangely nervous. He, who negotiated billion-dollar contracts without his blood pressure even budging, now felt his palms sweating at the prospect of meeting a street kid. When the door opened, he almost took a step back. Not because of the girl's appearance, although she was clean, her newly cut dark hair framing a thin, pale face, but because of the impact of her eyes. They were old eyes on a young face. Eyes that had seen too much, that mistrusted the world and its empty promises. "Hello," he said, his voice suddenly faltering. The girl just watched him without answering. She was sitting in a chair that was too big for her small body, her legs swinging without touching the floor. She wore donated clothes, clean, but clearly not her size. I wanted to thank you. The doctors said you saved my life." She remained silent, but something in her gaze changed. A cautious curiosity like that of a wild animal assessing whether it can trust. "Why did you do it?" he asked, genuinely intrigued. "Why help a stranger?" For a moment he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, almost in a whisper, the child's voice sounded for the first time. "You were still breathing." 4 words. Simple, direct. You were still breathing, as if that was reason enough to risk herself, to care. The millionaire felt something break inside him. The impeccable logic of a child who, even having been abandoned by the world, still believed that a life, any life, deserved to be saved. He approached, taking care not to scare her, and sat down in a chair nearby. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "They call me Alley Girl," she replied, shrugging, "but I have a real name." A wave of protection, as unexpected as it was powerful, flooded the millionaire's chest. At that moment, he knew that his life had changed irrevocably, not because of the assault or because he had been on the verge of death, but because, for the first time in 6 years, something more important than numbers had awakened in his dormant heart. "Well, alley girl," he said, with a smile he hadn't used in so long that it felt rusty on his face, "I think we have a lot to talk about." The millionaire adjusted his tie for the 3rd time while waiting in the director's office at the shelter. A week had passed since his first meeting with the girl. 7 days in which he hadn't been able to think about anything else. The board meetings, the international contracts, the multi-million-dollar acquisitions, everything seemed distant and unimportant compared to those sad eyes that haunted him in his dreams. "Sorry to keep you waiting," said the director, entering the room with a file in her hands. "We have some procedures to follow." "I understand," he replied, although in reality he didn't. In his world, things happened the moment he determined them. Waiting wasn't part of his vocabulary. "Sir, I'd like to understand exactly what your intentions are," the director said directly as she sat down. "The girl is under the protection of the state. Any contact needs to be carefully evaluated." The millionaire hesitated. What did he want? The question reverberated in his mind, awakening old pains. 6 years ago, he had a wife who carried his only child in her womb, a future. All of that had disappeared in a night of fire and chaos. Since then, he had built his empire on the ashes of his dreams, turning pain into relentless ambition. "I just want to help her," he replied finally. The director studied him for a long moment. "We receive many offers of help when a child appears in the media. Most disappear in weeks, some in days." He felt the blow, but maintained his composure. "I'm not most." "No, you're not," she agreed. "But that doesn't mean your presence is the best thing for her. This girl has suffered enough abandonment." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He who had built his reputation on the ability to control everything and everyone around him was being questioned about his consistency. "Can I see her today?" he asked, deflecting the implicit accusation. The director nodded reluctantly. "She's asked about you. It's the first time she's shown interest in anyone since she arrived." Minutes later, in the same small room as their first meeting, the millionaire waited nervously. He had brought a gift, a storybook he had found, in a specialty bookstore. He didn't know if she could read, but the illustrations were beautiful. It was a start. The door opened, and there she was. Something had changed. Her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she wore new clothes, probably better donations that the shelter had managed to get. But that wasn't it. It was a spark, of recognition in her eyes, an almost imperceptible opening in her defensive posture. "Hi," she said first, surprising him. "Hi," he replied, feeling strangely awkward. "I brought something for you." He held out the book, watching the girl's reaction. She took it with reverential care, as if it were made of crystal. Her small fingers slid over the illustrated cover. "It's yours, for real," he explained, seeing her hesitation. "You can keep it." The girl looked from the book to him, distrustful. Why? It was a simple but devastating question. Why would someone give her something without expecting anything in return? The world didn't work that way, not the world she knew. The millionaire felt a lump in his throat. Because I liked meeting you." She didn't seem convinced. Her eyes held the skepticism of someone who had learned the hard way that promises break and people disappear. "You're going to leave," she said. It wasn't a question, it was a statement, a truth she had already accepted, preparing herself for another disappointment. "No," he replied with more firmness than he intended. "I'm not." The girl just shrugged, a gesture that seemed to say, "I've heard that before." She placed the book carefully beside her and looked at her own hands. The silence that followed was painful. The millionaire realized that he didn't know how to communicate with a child, especially one who carried so much pain. His world of business hadn't prepared him for this. "Do you want to hear a story?" he asked finally, pointing to the book. "I can't read very well," she confessed in a low voice. "I never went to school much." "I can read it to you," he offered. She looked up, surprised. The offer seemed as strange as it was sincere. Slowly, she took the book and handed it back to him, a gesture of trust so small yet so significant that the millionaire felt his heart clench. As he read the story in a hesitant voice, unaccustomed to this kind of intimacy, the millionaire felt something thawing inside him. It was strange and scary. Each sentence read was a brick removed from the wall he had built around his emotions. When he finished reading, he noticed that the girl was closer, her eyes fixed on the illustrations. "Can I come back tomorrow?" he asked, closing the book. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. On the way out of the shelter, the driver waited with the limo door open. The millionaire hesitated before getting in. Something was stopping him. The idea of returning to his isolated world, to meetings and acquisitions, seemed suddenly empty. "Cancel my appointments for tomorrow," he instructed his assistant over the phone. "And find the best attorney specializing in child law that money." "Can buy." He hung up before he could hear the protests on the other end of the line. On the horizon, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the city. The same streets, the same sky. But for the first time in 6 years, the millionaire was looking at the world with different eyes. With eyes that were beginning, slowly, to see beyond the numbers. The millionaire's routine completely transformed in the following weeks. The mornings, once dedicated to international conference calls, now included visits to the shelter. The afternoons, normally filled with board meetings, were partially occupied by conversations with social workers and specialized attorneys. And most surprisingly, he didn't mind the change. On his 20th consecutive day of visiting, he brought a different proposal. "Would you like to see where I live?" he asked the girl, who was already waiting for him in the visiting room with less apprehension than before. She blinked, confused. "Your house?" "Yes," he confirmed. "I thought we could spend the afternoon there. The director has already authorized it, on the condition that a social worker accompanies us." He hesitated. "Only if you want to, of course." The girl bit her lip, clearly divided between curiosity and fear. The world outside the shelter, and especially the world of wealthy adults, was unknown and potentially dangerous territory. But there was something about this man that, against all logic, was starting to seem safe. "Is there food there?" she asked finally, bringing a genuine smile to the millionaire's face. "Yes, lots. We can order whatever you want." An hour later, the limo pulled up in front of the tallest building in the city. The girl looked out the window, her eyes wide at the imposing building. Beside her, the social worker, a young woman named Sophia, smiled gently. "Do you live here?" the girl asked, her voice almost inaudible. "On the top floors," confirmed the millionaire, trying not to think about how his 3,000 square foot residence suddenly seemed ostentatious and unnecessary. The panoramic elevator rose smoothly, revealing the city shrinking beneath their feet. The girl gripped the social worker's hand, both fascinated and terrified by the view. "It feels like we're flying," she whispered. When the doors opened directly into the penthouse, the millionaire felt a strange shame. He saw his own space through the child's eyes, the cold marble, the designer furniture, the expensive and impersonal artwork. A place made to impress, not to live. "Welcome," he said, suddenly insecure. The girl took hesitant steps into the apartment. Her small feet, now shod in new sneakers provided by the shelter, barely made a sound on the polished floor. She looked at everything with a mixture of awe and distrust, as if she expected to be kicked out at any moment. "Do you live here alone?" she asked, noticing the absence of any personal touch in the environment. "Yes," he replied. "Just me and some staff who take care of the house." "It's too big for one person," she observed, with the cutting honesty that only children possess. The millionaire exchanged a quick glance with the social worker, who watched the interaction with professional interest. "Yes, I think you're right," he admitted. They proceeded to the kitchen, where the private chef had prepared a variety of dishes that he imagined would please a child. The girl sat at the immense dining table, seeming even smaller, surrounded by so much space. "What would you like to try first?" asked the millionaire. She looked at the plentiful table, clearly overwhelmed with so many options. In her life on the streets, choices were a luxury that didn't exist. You ate what you found when you found it. Can I try a little of each?" she asked, afraid of being greedy. "Of course you can," he assured her, serving her with a mix of dishes that would make any nutritionist cringe. But that brought a genuine sparkle to the girl's eyes. While they ate, the conversation flowed more easily. The presence of food seemed to have broken down an invisible barrier. The girl talked about the other children at the shelter, about how the director always told stories before bedtime, and about a stray dog that used to follow her when she lived on the streets. "His name was Spot. I shared my food with him," she said, "but one day he didn't show up anymore." The simplicity with which she recounted her losses made the millionaire's heart clench. For her, disappearances were just part of life. People, animals, things, everything was transient. After lunch, she asked to see the rest of the apartment. The millionaire guided her, with the social worker always nearby, through the impersonal rooms. The immense home theater, the private gym, the offices, the meeting rooms. In each environment, the girl's reaction was the same. A silent astonishment, followed by an observation about how everything seemed unused. It was when they reached the last room, a room that had remained locked for 6 years, that the millionaire hesitated. His hand trembled slightly on the doorknob. "What's in there?" asked the girl, noticing his hesitation. It was supposed to be a kid's room," he explained, his voice suddenly hoarse. The social worker gave him a knowing look. She knew the story. Everyone knew it. The fire, the tragedy, the transformation of the promising young entrepreneur into the ruthless CEO he had become afterward. "Can we see?" insisted the girl, with the natural curiosity of her age. The millionaire took a deep breath and opened the door. The room was exactly as it had been left 6 years ago. A crib that had never been used. Shelves with carefully selected children's books. Toys still in their packaging. A mobile of stars and planets hanging from the ceiling. And in an armchair in the corner, a hand-knitted baby blanket, the last gift his wife had prepared before the tragedy. "Wow," whispered the girl, looking around with wide eyes. "It's all so pretty." The millionaire couldn't answer. An emotion, long repressed, rose in his throat, threatening to spill over. He turned quickly, mumbling an excuse, and stepped out into the hallway. The social worker made a move to follow him, worried, but the girl was faster. She caught up with the millionaire in the hallway and, without saying anything, took his hand. A gesture so simple, so unexpected, the small hand in his, offering comfort, the roles reversed, the child comforting the adult. "Thank you," he murmured. When he finally managed to speak, the girl just nodded, as if she perfectly understood the magnitude of that moment. And perhaps she did. After all, she also knew the pain of loss, the emptiness of interrupted dreams. At the end of the afternoon, when it was time to return to the shelter, the girl looked one last time at the apartment. Not at the marbles or the artwork, but at the hallway that led to that special room. Then, turning to the millionaire, she Ask the question that would change everything. Have you ever thought about having another family? Sir, the lawyers are waiting in the conference room, informed the assistant, entering the millionaire's office with her usual efficiency. He nodded, without taking his eyes off the document he was reading for the third time. It was a detailed report on the girl. Fragmented medical history, incomplete school records, and the few available details about her past before the streets. A puzzle with many missing pieces. Ask them to wait another 10 minutes, he replied, turning another page of the report. The assistant hesitated, something rare in her years of impeccable service. If I may, sir, the board is concerned. There are rumors about your involvement with this child's case. The press has started asking questions, and the stock dropped 2 points yesterday. The millionaire finally raised his eyes from the document. Well, some shareholders are questioning whether this could affect the company's image. Whether it's prudent. A heavy silence fell over the room. A while ago, a suggestion like that would have been enough for him to take immediate action. His reputation, the empire he had built, always came first. I appreciate the concern, he said finally, with a calmness that surprised even himself. But my personal life is not up for discussion, not now, not ever. The assistant recognized the implicit dismissal and left, leaving him alone with his thoughts. The last 2 months had transformed his life in ways he had never imagined possible. The visits to the shelter had become a fixed part of his routine. The conversations with the girl, once hesitant and full of silences, now flowed with an ease that amazed him. She had begun to trust him little by little. Small gestures revealed this change. A smile when he arrived, questions about his day, the way she held his hand when they crossed the street during the supervised outings they now took regularly. Closing the report, the millionaire headed to the conference room where the legal team was waiting for him. It was time to take the next step. Gentlemen, he greeted, entering the room with the posture that had made him famous in the corporate world. Let's discuss the options for temporary guardianship. The lawyers exchanged surprised glances. When they were hired, the expectation was a significant donation to the shelter, perhaps a scholarship for the girl. No one expected that the man known for his executive coldness would want to take direct responsibility for a street child. Sir, began the lead attorney, I must warn you that the process will be complex. Family courts are extremely cautious, especially in cases of guardianship for single individuals without parental experience. I am aware, he replied, and prepared for any obstacle. There's also the issue of adaptation, continued another lawyer. The child has lived in extremely difficult circumstances. The transition to an environment like yours could be traumatic. The millionaire smiled slightly, thinking about the question the girl had asked him a month ago. Have you ever thought about having another family? I believe we are both more prepared for this transition than you imagine, he replied, with a confidence he hadn't felt in years. Now, let's get to work. I want a detailed plan by the end of the week. While the lawyers discussed strategies and legal deadlines, the millionaire's mind wandered to the shelter where the girl was probably now awaiting his afternoon visit. He had promised to bring a new jigsaw puzzle after he discovered her, surprising skill with the previous one. Later, at the shelter, the millionaire found the girl in the makeshift library. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by books, trying to read by herself. Her face lit up when she saw him, a genuine smile replacing the concentrated expression. You came, she exclaimed, as if each visit was a surprise. I promised, didn't I? He replied, sitting down beside her on the worn carpet. I brought something. For us. He took out of the bag a 1,000-piece puzzle, a considerable challenge even for adults. It was a picture of a sunny park with families picnicking under leafy trees. The girl's eyes gleamed with excitement. Can we start now? Of course, he smiled, opening the box and spreading the pieces between them. While they sorted the edges, the millionaire gathered the courage to touch on the subject that had filled his thoughts for weeks. "You know, I've been talking to some people about you," he began cautiously. "What people?" she asked, without taking her eyes off the colored pieces. "Lawyers, people who understand the laws about children without families." The girl stopped, a piece suspended between her small fingers. Her eyes met his, suddenly alert. "Are you going to send me away?" she asked, her voice almost inaudible. The question hit him like a dagger. "No, no, not at all," he hurried to reply, gently placing his hand over hers. "Actually, I'm trying to find out if you could come and live with me. For a while, at least." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. The girl looked at him, her large eyes processing what she had just heard. There wasn't just surprise there, but also a deep fear. The fear of believing, of allowing herself to hope, only to be disappointed again. "Why?" she asked finally. The same simple question she had asked when he had given her the first book. The millionaire took a deep breath. How to explain something that he didn't even fully understand himself? How to put into words the silent revolution that had taken place inside him since the moment he had opened his eyes in that hospital and learned that a street kid had saved his life? "Because since I met you, my house doesn't feel so empty anymore," he replied honestly, "and because I think we can help each other." The girl lowered her eyes to the puzzle, processing his words. Carefully, she fitted the piece she was holding. "I don't know how to be anyone's daughter," she confessed in a low voice. "I've never had a real family." "And I've never been a father," he replied, feeling a lump in his throat. "Maybe we can learn together." At that moment, something changed. Between them, a silent understanding, an unspoken promise. The girl extended her small hand and held his, not because she needed support or comfort, but as a gesture of acceptance, of partnership. They continued to assemble the puzzle in a comfortable silence, interrupted only by occasional exclamations when they found matching pieces. Two broken people trying to build something whole together, piece by piece. In the following week, the supervised visits became more frequent. The millionaire reorganized his entire professional schedule, delegating responsibilities that he had previously considered non-delegable, canceling international trips that would have been unquestionable before. The director of the shelter watched this transformation with professional caution, but also with a growing hope. In 20 years, working with abandoned children, she had rarely witnessed such a genuine connection between an adult and a child without blood ties. "She's different," commented the director during one of her regular conversations with the millionaire. "More open, more present. She's even started making friends with other children." "She's extraordinary," he replied, with a pride that surprised him. "Yes, she is," agreed the director, studying him with experienced eyes. "You've changed quite a bit too, you know." The millionaire reflected on this observation as he drove back to the office. His reflection in the rearview mirror revealed a man different from the one who, months ago, had watched the city from the top of his glass tower. The same features, the same impeccable suit, but something fundamental had changed in his eyes. They were alive again. A month later, after countless interviews, psychological evaluations, and home visits, the family court judge finally granted temporary guardianship. The girl could move into the millionaire's penthouse under regular supervision from social services. On the morning of the move, the millionaire was as nervous as he had ever been before any billion-dollar negotiation. He re-examined every detail of the room he had prepared for her, not the old nursery, which remained as a silent memorial, but a new space, decorated with the help of a designer specializing in children's environments. When the social worker, Arrived with the girl and her small suitcase of belongings, the world seemed to stop for a moment. There they were, on the threshold of a new life, both terrified and hopeful. "Welcome to your new home," he said, his voice betraying his emotion. The girl looked around, then back at him, her eyes reflecting a complex mixture of fear and hope. Then she took a step forward and entered, carrying with her the promise of a new beginning. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows of the penthouse, creating golden patterns on the hardwood floor. It had been 3 months since the girl had moved in, and gradually the once austere apartment was gaining touches of life. Colorful drawings pinned to the refrigerator with magnets, toys organized in baskets in the living room, a pair of small sneakers always forgotten in the hallway. The millionaire watched the girl swim in the indoor pool under the watchful supervision of the instructor who came 3 times a week. Her adaptation to the water had been surprisingly fast, as had her adaptation to almost everything in her new life. There was a resilience in her that left him in awe, an ability to absorb new experiences without losing her essence. "Look at me! I'm swimming by myself!" she shouted, kicking her legs and arms in the water with determination, while the instructor cautiously moved away. "I see you," he replied, with his chest swelling with a pride he had never imagined feeling. Later, after the dinner that they now shared religiously every night, came the ritual of bath time. In the early days, the social worker hired to help with the transition took care of this part, but gradually the girl began to allow the millionaire to participate in her routine. "Can I use the strawberry shampoo today?" she asked, already inside the bubble-filled tub. "Of course," he replied, reaching for the colorful bottle, "but let's be careful with your eyes, remember?" As he helped lather her hair, now shiny and well cared for, the millionaire reflected on how simple tasks like that had become the most precious moments of his days. The board meetings, once the center of his existence, now seemed like mere appointments between the truly important moments. Taking the girl to school, helping her with her homework, reading stories before bed. "Can you turn around so I can soap your back?" he asked, soaking the sponge. The girl obeyed, turning her back to him. That's when it happened. Something that the millionaire had vaguely noticed before, but never really observed closely. A mark on the girl's skin, between her right shoulder blade and spine. It wasn't a common scar. It had a distinctive shape, almost like a small leaf or flame. His hand stopped in the air, the sponge dripping water into the tub. A wave of recognition hit him with such force that he almost lost his balance. "What is it?" asked the girl, noticing his hesitation. "Nothing," he managed to answer, his voice strangely distant. I just think the water's getting cold. Let's finish quickly." With mechanical movements, he concluded the bath, helped her get dressed and put her to bed. He read a story, as he always did, but barely registered the words that came out of his own mouth. His mind was elsewhere, 6 years in the past, in a hospital room, looking at his pregnant wife during an ultrasound. "Look," the doctor had said, pointing to the screen. "Your daughter has a small birthmark here on her back, perfectly healthy, just a quirk." After the girl fell asleep, the millionaire went to his office and locked the door. With trembling hands, he opened the safe hidden behind a painting and removed a box he hadn't touched in years. Inside, carefully preserved, were the belongings of his late wife. Among letters, photographs, and jewelry, he found what he was looking for: an envelope with the results of the last ultrasound performed before the tragedy. The black and white images showed the fetus completely formed, and a detailed report mentioned the characteristic birthmark. The coincidence would be impossible. The mark on the girl was identical to the one described in the medical report. But how? How could this be possible? His wife had died in the fire when she was in her 8th month of pregnancy. The body had been identified. The baby presumably was gone too. Unless... A crazy idea began to form in his mind. What if the unthinkable had happened? What if somehow the baby had survived? The chaos of that night, the confusion in the overwhelmed hospital, the gaps in the records. No, it was absurd. A cruel coincidence. It had to be. But what if it wasn't? With sudden decision, he picked up the phone and called the private investigator he used for corporate investigations. "I need you here in an hour," he ordered, "and bring your DNA collection kit." The next morning, while the girl was at school, the millionaire waited in his office, his body tense as a rope about to snap. When the phone rang, he answered it before the first ring was complete. "So?" he asked, without preamble. The voice on the other end of the line hesitated for a moment. "Sir, we ran the tests twice to confirm. There's no room for error." "Say it." "The genetic compatibility is 99.98%. You are, without a doubt, the child's biological father." The world stopped. The phone slipped from his hand, falling onto the rug with a dull thud. A torrent of emotions, shock, confusion, joy, anger, guilt, exploded inside his chest. His daughter, his biological daughter, alive. The daughter he thought he had lost in the fire that had taken his wife. The daughter who, by some cruel miracle of fate, had ended up on the streets, scavenging for garbage to survive, while he accumulated billions. In a tower of glass and steel, the implications were overwhelming. Someone had taken his daughter from the hospital that night. Someone had stolen precious years from both of them. Why? How had she ended up abandoned? What had happened in the first years of her life before the streets? Unanswered questions swirled in his mind as he tried to process the impossible truth. The girl who had saved his life was his own daughter, flesh of his flesh, the last gift from his late wife. And somehow, destiny had brought them together. "No," said the social worker firmly, "you can't just tell her like that without preparation." The millionaire paced back and forth in the makeshift meeting room in his penthouse. 3 days had passed since the bombshell revelation, and the urgency to share the truth with the girl consumed him from within. "She has the right to know," he insisted, his voice trembling with contained emotion. "She's my daughter, my biological daughter, who I thought I had lost. Every minute that passes without her knowing feels like a lie." The child psychologist, specially summoned for the situation, intervened in a calm voice. "I understand your anxiety. I really do. But we need to think from her perspective. This child has already experienced multiple abandonments, street trauma, and was finally starting to build trust and stability. A revelation of this magnitude, without proper preparation, could emotionally devastate her." The millionaire dropped heavily into a chair. The discovery of the truth, which should have been the happiest moment of his life, had turned into an ethical and emotional torment. "How could someone do this?" he murmured, more to himself than to the professionals present. "How could they steal my daughter and then abandon her?" The director of the shelter, who had also been called to the emergency meeting, was flipping through the few available records about the girl's past. The records indicate that she was first found at the age of 4, apparently left in a shopping mall. No identification, just simple but clean clothes. She knew her first name, but not her last name, or any information about her parents. She was referred for adoption, but what? Pressed the millionaire. But the adoptive family returned her 6 months later. They claimed adaptation problems, saying that she had frequent nightmares and difficult behaviors. The director hesitated. It was after this return that she ran away for the first time. The runaways became recurrent until she ended up permanently on the streets. Each word was a stab in the millionaire's heart. His daughter had been torn from him, placed with strangers, rejected, and finally abandoned to her own fate on the dangerous streets of the city. "The investigation into the kidnapping is ongoing," informed the lawyer who was attending the meeting. by video conference. But after 6 years, the traces are practically non-existent. The fire at the hospital destroyed many records. We are cross-referencing data with people who worked there at the time, but it's a delicate investigation. "I don't care how long it takes," replied the millionaire with an icy determination. "I want answers. I want justice." "At the moment," interrupted the psychologist, "our priority should be the emotional well-being of the girl. I suggest we start with more intensive therapy sessions, gradually preparing her for the truth." "How long?" he asked. "There is no exact answer. It could be weeks, maybe months. We need to follow her pace, observe how she processes her emotions, how she develops trust." That night, after everyone had left, the millionaire found himself standing at the door of the girl's room, watching her sleep. The soft light of the bedside lamp revealed her face relaxed in sleep, her dark hair spread on the pillow, hair so similar to her mother's that it was almost painful to look at. "She's just like you," he whispered to the ghost of his wife. "How didn't I realize it before?" The days that followed were a silent torture. Every moment with the girl was simultaneously precious and agonizing. Hiding the truth felt like a betrayal, but revealing it prematurely could be devastating. The millionaire found himself studying her face during breakfast, looking for his own features, marveling at the similarities that now seemed obvious. The girl, sensitive as always, noticed the change. "Are you sad?" she asked during a walk-in. The park, 2 weeks after the discovery. "No, I'm not sad," he replied, holding her small hand. "Why do you think that? You've been looking at me differently, and sometimes it looks like you're going to cry." Her perspicacity completely disarmed him. They sat on a park bench, watching other children play on the playground. "You know," he began, choosing his words carefully, "sometimes people find out things that make them think a lot about life." "What kind of things?" "Things about the past, about people we love." The girl swung her legs, thoughtful. "When I lived on the streets, I thought a lot about whether my mom and dad were alive somewhere, if they remembered me." The millionaire's heart seemed to stop in his chest. "And what did you conclude?" She shrugged, with a sadness too wise for her 6 years. "That it didn't matter anymore, that I needed to be strong on my own." He fought the urge to hug her tightly, to tell her everything right there, to guarantee that she would never be alone again. "And now?" he asked, his voice almost failing. "What do you think about that now?" The girl looked at him, her large eyes reflecting a nascent trust that was the most precious treasure he had ever received. "Now I think that maybe I don't need to be strong on my own anymore." The profound simplicity of her words almost broke the millionaire's resolve. At that moment, he almost told her, almost let the truth slip. But then he remembered the psychologist's warnings, the trauma that the revelation could reopen, and he held back. "No, you don't," he assured her, squeezing her hand. "Never again." The following week, the bomb dropped. Somehow, the press found out about the DNA test. Maybe an employee of the laboratory, tempted by easy money, or maybe an indiscretion by someone close to the investigation. Regardless of the source, the morning began with sensational headlines in every newspaper and news website. Billionaire CEO discovers street child is his legitimate daughter. Heiress of the streets, the unbelievable story of the girl who lived as a beggar. Tragedy and redemption, the reunion between billionaire father and lost daughter. Chaos ensued. Reporters surrounded the building. Phone calls flooded the corporate office. Messages from supposed relatives and acquaintances of the girl began to arrive, many clearly motivated by the prospect of taking financial advantage of the situation. Worse, the school called. Other children had brought the newspapers, showing the headlines, asking questions, some cruelly mocking. The girl was in shock, refusing to leave the guidance counselor's office. When the millionaire arrived to pick her up, he found her curled up in a corner, her face streaked with tears, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Is it true?" she asked, her small voice almost inaudible. "Are you my real dad? My blood dad?" The moment he had tried so hard to prepare for properly had arrived in the worst possible way. There was no longer any way to protect her from the truth, only from the impact it would have. Kneeling before her, the millionaire did the only thing he could do. He looked into his daughter's eyes and answered with the truth that they both deserved. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm your dad, your real dad, and I thought I had lost you forever." The armored limousine moved slowly through the city, escorted by 2 security cars. Inside the vehicle, the silence was absolute. The millionaire watched the girl, his daughter, sitting on the opposite seat, her small body tense as a violin string, her eyes fixed on the window, although the curtains were drawn to avoid the flashes of the photographers. Since the forced revelation at school 2 days ago, she had barely spoken. The few questions she had asked were brief, almost telegraphic. Where was her mother? Dead. Why hadn't he looked for her? He believed she had died too. How had she ended up on the streets? They still didn't know. They were investigating. Each answer seemed to increase the distance between them. The bond, carefully built in recent months, seemed to have been brutally severed by the truth revealed in the worst possible way. The child psychologist had recommended a temporary removal from the city, away from the press, away from the school, away from everything that could pressure the girl to process information for which she was not prepared. "We're almost there," said the millionaire, attempting a smile that found no response. "You'll like the beach house. It's a quiet place with plenty of room to play." The girl just nodded, without taking her eyes off the covered window. The beachfront property was isolated enough to ensure privacy, with reinforced security at the gates and throughout the perimeter. When they finally arrived, the afternoon was beginning to fall, painting the ocean with shades of orange and gold. Carrying the small suitcase that the girl had insisted on packing herself, the millionaire guided her into the spacious and airy house. Unlike the urban penthouse, this place had been decorated years ago by his late wife and maintained a welcoming warmth that his apartment had never had. "Your room is on the 2nd floor, overlooking the ocean," he explained as they climbed the wooden staircase. "Your mother, she loved this place. We used to come here on weekends." Upon mentioning her mother, the millionaire noticed a slight tremor in the girl's shoulders, the first visible emotional reaction in days. The room, prepared in haste by the team that had come a day in advance, had light blue walls and a large 4-poster bed. A glass door led to a small balcony from which you could see the entire ocean, seemingly endless. "I'll let you settle in," he said, placing the suitcase on a padded bench. "I'll be downstairs when you want to come down." When he reached the door, the girl's voice stopped him, so low that he almost didn't hear it. "What was she like?" The millionaire turned slowly. "Your mother?" The girl nodded, still with her back to him, looking through the glass door at the ocean. He took a deep breath, feeling the familiar lump in his throat whenever he thought of his lost wife. She was extraordinary, intelligent, kind, determined. She had the most beautiful smile I've ever seen. He paused, gathering courage. "You have her smile. Do I have a picture of her?" "Yes, many." He hesitated. "Do you want to see them now?" For a long moment, the girl didn't answer. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. An hour later, they were sitting side by side on the rug in the room, a photograph album open between them. The millionaire turned the pages slowly, showing images of the woman they had both lost, the mother the girl had never consciously known, the wife whose absence had transformed the millionaire into an empty shell for 6 long years. "Here, she was pregnant with you," he explained, pointing to a photo where the woman smiled radiantly, her hands on her prominent belly. She was so happy. We dreamed so much about you. The girl touched the photograph with her fingertips, as if she could feel the texture of that past happiness. There were silent tears streaming down her face, but she didn't make a sound. "I'm so sorry," said the millionaire, his own voice choked with emotion. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you, for all those years we lost. If I had known..." "It wasn't your fault," interrupted the girl, with an understanding beyond her age. "You thought I had died." An invisible barrier seemed to break with those words. The millionaire pulled her into his arms, and for the first time, she didn't resist the hug. They stayed like that for a long time, father and daughter united by shared grief, by lost possibilities, and by the unexpected chance of rebuilding. Later, while they were preparing a simple dinner together, something the millionaire had never done in his adult life, the girl showed the first sign of active curiosity since the revelation. "How did you find out that I was your daughter?" He explained about the birthmark, the medical report, the DNA test. He told her how he was in shock, how he wanted to protect her from the truth until she was ready, and how the press had stolen that possibility. "We're trying to find out what happened after the fire," he added, placing plates on the table. "How you were separated from us, who took you, how you ended up alone." The girl pushed the macaroni around on her plate, thoughtful. "I remember some things," she said finally. "Things from before the streets." The millionaire froze, his hands suspended in the air. "What kind of things?" "A woman. She wasn't very old. She took care of me, but she wasn't kind. There were other children too in a small apartment." She frowned, concentrating on the fragmented memories. "She called me another name, said my real parents had abandoned me, that I should be grateful to her." Each word was a painful revelation. The millionaire struggled to maintain his composure, not to scare the girl with the anger he felt growing inside him. "Can you remember where that place was? Or the woman's name?" She shook her head negatively. "I only remember that there was a playground with red swings nearby. I saw it from the window, but we almost never got to go." It was a tenuous clue, but it was something. The millionaire made a mental note to pass this information on to the investigators the next morning. In the days that followed, a new routine began to establish itself in the beach house. The mornings were dedicated to private lessons arranged by the millionaire's staff to make up for the lost school days. The afternoons were free, walks on the beach, board games, puzzles, or simply watching the ocean from the balcony. One afternoon, while they were building a sandcastle on the private beach, the girl asked a question that caught the millionaire by surprise. "Can I call you Dad?" He stopped what he was doing, his heart racing. You would like that?" She nodded, her small fingers carefully shaping a sand tower. "I've never called anyone that before, for real, I mean." "I would love it," he replied, his voice trembling with emotion, "more than anything in the world." The girl smiled, a small smile, still cautious, but real. It was the first since this revelation. "Do we have the same last name now?" she asked. "Yes, legally. The lawyers took care of it." He hesitated, then added, "Your full name. The name we chose for you when you were born is on your original birth certificate. But if you prefer to keep just the first name, we can do that." She thought for a moment, her head tilted in concentration. "I want to know what it was. My full name." The millionaire said the name chosen years ago, his voice soft as a prayer. The girl repeated it, testing how it sounded in her own voice. "It's pretty," she decided finally. "We can use both. The name I know for every day, and this can be our secret, just for important things." "Our secret," he agreed, feeling that he had just received a priceless gift, just for important things. In the third week at the beach house, the investigation brought the first concrete results. The lawyer called early in the morning, his voice tense with contained excitement. "We found a match with the description of the playground," he informed. "There is only one residential complex in the north area with red swings that dates from that time. We managed to identify a woman who lived there and who had a history of temporary work at the hospital where your wife gave birth." The millionaire felt the blood run cold in his veins. "Have you located her?" "Yes, she was detained for questioning this morning. She's not cooperating voluntarily, but the police found documents in her apartment. False records, payment receipts." "Sir, it seems she didn't act alone." "What? Who else would be involved?" There was a heavy pause. "It's still early to confirm, but there are indications that someone close to you may have ordered the kidnapping." The revelation hit him like a physical blow. Someone close, someone who knew his family, who knew about the pregnancy, who may have even visited the hospital. The betrayal was almost inconceivable. "Keep me informed, every detail immediately." He hung up the phone, feeling nauseous. Who could have orchestrated something so monstrous? And why? Money? Revenge? Or something even more sinister? In the afternoon, while the girl was busy with the art teacher, he received another call. It was the lead detective. "Sir, we need you to return to the city. There are developments that require your immediate presence." "I can't leave my daughter now." "I understand, but this is crucial. The suspect is talking, and what she's revealing, well, it has serious implications, including for the current safety of your daughter." That settled the matter. That night, after a careful conversation with the girl and ensuring that the house would be under reinforced protection, the millionaire boarded the private helicopter bound for the city. At the special police station, the atmosphere was tense. When he entered the room where the investigators were waiting for him, the millionaire immediately realized from everyone's grave expression that whatever they had discovered was worse than he had imagined. "Sir," began the chief detective, "the suspect, Mrs. Cardoso, was a nurse's aide at the hospital at the time of the fire. She confessed to removing your daughter from the neonatal ward during the confusion, at the request of a third party who paid a considerable sum." "Who?" demanded the millionaire, his hands clenched into fists. "Who did it?" The chief detective exchanged a look with the prosecutor present. "According to her testimony, it was your former business partner, Marcus Ferreira." The shock was so great that the millionaire needed to lean on the table to avoid falling. Marcus, his college friend, the man who had helped him found the company, who had been the best man at his wedding, who had consoled him after the supposed death of his wife and daughter, the same man who, after the tragedy, had sold his share of the company for a fraction of its real value, claiming that he wanted to start over far from the painful memories. "Why?" he finally managed to ask. "Why would he do something like that?" According to Mrs. Cardoso, he never fully explained. He paid her to kidnap her and deliver her to an adoptive family in another state. The story he made up for the family was that the child's mother had died in childbirth and the father didn't want anything to do with her. "But that doesn't make sense," protested the millionaire. "Marcus was like a brother to me." The chief detective pushed a folder across the table. "We found this in the company archives. These are old emails recovered from the backup servers. It seems that in the months before the fire, you had a serious disagreement about the direction of the company." The millionaire flipped through the documents with growing horror. It was true. They had argued intensely about a possible acquisition. Marcus wanted to sell to an international conglomerate, while he insisted on maintaining family control, especially with the imminent arrival of his daughter. He wanted the company. He always wanted it, he murmured, the pieces fitting together terribly in his mind. "After the tragedy, I was so destroyed that I didn't care when he sold his share. I just let him go." "We believe the original plan was more sinister," said the prosecutor, choosing his words carefully. Mrs. Cardoso claims that Marcus initially talked about an accident that would affect the entire family. The fire at the hospital was a coincidence that he took advantage of, altering his plan to the kidnapping of the child. The implication was clear and devastating. Marcus probably planned to murder not only his daughter, but also his wife and himself. The accidental fire had spared him and the girl, although separating them for 6 long years. "Where is he now?" asked the millionaire, a dangerous calm in his voice. "That's the problem," replied the chief detective, tense. "We don't know. He left the country 3 days ago, shortly after the news about you and your daughter broke in the media. We're working with Interpol, but..." It wasn't necessary to complete the sentence. A man with Marcus's resources could disappear for a long time, maybe forever. Does he represent a threat to my daughter? We can't rule out that possibility. If he finds out that Mrs. Cardoso is cooperating with the investigation. The millionaire was already standing, grabbing the phone. "Double the security at the beach house. No one enters or leaves without complete verification. Prepare the private jet. I'll be returning immediately." On the flight back, sitting alone in the luxurious cabin of the jet, the millionaire faced the storm of emotions that threatened to consume him. Anger, betrayal, guilt, each feeling more suffocating than the last. How hadn't he suspected? How hadn't he seen the signs? More importantly, how would he protect his daughter now? The answer came to him with crystal clarity as the jet cut through the night sky. There was no longer any way to hide the truth or protect her from the harsh reality. To keep her safe, he would need to trust her. He would need to treat her not just as a child to be protected, but as a partner in building a secure future for both of them. When the helicopter landed at the beachfront property, dawn was already breaking. The house was lit up, despite the hour. He found the girl awake, sitting in the living room with the psychologist who had come to accompany her during his absence. "Dad!" she exclaimed, running into his arms. The term, used for the first time so naturally, hit him like a wave of warmth. He hugged her tightly, feeling that he had finally come home, not to a place, but to the person who was his true home. "Is everything okay?" she asked, studying his face with concern. The millionaire exchanged a look with the psychologist, who nodded slightly. "We have some things to talk about," he said, guiding her to the sofa. "Important things, and I promise that this time I'm going to tell you the whole truth." The first light of morning found father and daughter sitting on the balcony of the beach house, wrapped in blankets against the cool morning breeze. The horizon was beginning to be tinged with pink and orange, a new day dawning over the infinite ocean. "So he was your friend," said the girl, processing everything she had heard during the long conversation of the early morning. "And he wanted to hurt you." The millionaire had explained everything simply but honestly, as advised by the psychologist. The betrayal of Marcus, the planned kidnapping, the lost years, all adapted so that a 6-year-old could understand without minimizing the seriousness of the situation. "Yes," he confirmed. "Sometimes people who seem like friends can harbor bad feelings in their heart, envy, anger, greed. Like Cinderella's stepmother," she observed, with the crystal logic of childhood. He smiled despite the situation. "Something like that. And does he still want to hurt us?" The direct question made his heart clench. How to explain to a child that yes, there was possibly a dangerous man in the world who might want to harm her, a man who had already destroyed precious years of her life out of pure ambition? "We don't know for sure," he replied finally, opting for honesty. "That's why we have all this security here, to protect us while the police look for him." The girl nodded, surprisingly calm. "On the streets, there were also bad people. I learned to hide, to stay quiet." Those simple words were like knives in his heart. A child so young shouldn't know this kind of fear, shouldn't have learned to Stay quiet to survive. You don't need to hide anymore, he assured, squeezing her small hand. We're together now. I'm going to protect you, always. She looked at him with those old eyes in such a young face. We can protect each other, she corrected, with a wisdom that left him speechless. That same morning, the lawyer arrived with news. The police had located the family that had briefly adopted the girl years ago. Their testimony confirmed the scheme. They had received the child through an irregular adoption brokered by an agency that they later discovered to be fraudulent. They claim they returned her to the system because she had frequent nightmares and called out for someone in her sleep, explained the lawyer. They felt unable to cope with the trauma. Called out for whom? Asked the millionaire. From what? They say the girl repeated mama and papa. Probably she was calling for you. The revelation that his daughter still remembered them, even if unconsciously, even after being torn from their arms as a baby, was both comforting and devastating. As for the investigation into Marcus, continued the lawyer, Interpol confirmed that he was seen in Buenos Aires 2 days ago, but they lost his trail after that. The authorities are monitoring ports and airports throughout South America. He'll be back, said the millionaire, with somber certainty. It's too personal for him to simply disappear. That's exactly what the police fear. That's why they suggested a plan. The plan was audacious and risky, using the press that had tormented them so much to their advantage. Release a controlled story, announcing that the millionaire and his newly discovered daughter would be leaving the country temporarily to reconnect in privacy. But in reality, they would remain under protection on national soil. The idea is that if Marcus is monitoring news and believes you are no longer in the country, he may relax or change his plans, explained the lawyer. Meanwhile, we continue tracking him. The millionaire didn't like to lie, especially after promising total honesty to his daughter, but he recognized the strategic logic. He explained the plan to the girl in terms she could understand, emphasizing that it would be like a secret mission where they would need to be smart to catch the bad guy. Like spies? She asked, her eyes shining with excitement for the first time in days. Yes, like very brave spies. The next morning, the news was planted in the press. The powerful CEO and his daughter had left the country in his private jet, bound for an undisclosed destination in Europe. Carefully staged photographs, showing a silhouette that could be the millionaire boarding a plane, were leaked to the most sensationalist tabloids. Meanwhile, the two were secretly transferred to an isolated property in the mountains. An old coffee farm converted into a luxury residence with state-of-the-art security discreetly installed. It was there, among the verdant mountains and the clean air of the altitude, that something unexpected happened. Without the constant pressure of the media, without the curious eyes of the outside world, father and daughter finally had the chance to simply be a family. The mornings were dedicated to studies. The millionaire discovered with surprise that he had a talent for teaching. Math, making games that turned simple equations into adventures. In the afternoons, they explored the property together, collecting wildflowers, watching birds, learning the names of the native trees. At night, they sat on the wide balcony, wrapped in warm blankets against the mountain chill, and looked at the stars. It was during one of those nights that the girl asked a question that she had been keeping to herself. "Do you still run your big company?" "Aditum." The millionaire realized with surprise that he had barely thought about business in recent weeks. He, who used to check the global markets before even having coffee, now spent entire days without even opening his laptop. "I have trusted people, taking care of everything for now," he replied. "But you like your job, don't you?" The question made him reflect. Did he like it? There was a time when yes, when the company was a shared dream with his wife. a vision of the future for the family. They planned to build. After the tragedy, work had become just an escape, a way not to think, not to feel. "I used to like it a lot," he answered honestly. "Now, I'm rediscovering what really matters." The girl nodded, as if the answer made perfect sense to her. "I think you can like it again, but different." "Different how?" "Like something you do because you want to, not because you're sad or angry." The crystal wisdom of those words hit him deeply. His 6-year-old daughter had perfectly articulated the transformation he himself was beginning to feel. In the 3rd week in the mountains, the phone call they had been waiting for finally came. Marcus had been located in Uruguay, preparing to board a flight to Europe, presumably to follow the false trail planted in the press. "He fell into the trap," informed the chief detective. "The operation to apprehend him is underway. I should have more news in the next few hours." The tension was palpable as they waited. The millionaire couldn't concentrate on anything, checking the phone every few minutes. Even the girl was agitated, sensing the anxiety in the air. When the phone finally rang again, it was already night. The chief detective's voice sounded exhausted but victorious. "We got him. He's in custody without bail." The relief was so immense that the millionaire needed to sit down. Did he confess? Not formally yet, but with the nurse's testimony and the documentary evidence, we have a solid case. He won't escape this time. After hanging up, the millionaire found his daughter at the door of his room, clearly having overheard part of the conversation. "Was the bad man arrested?" she asked, her large eyes hopeful. "Yes, honey, he can't hurt us anymore." The smile that lit up her face was like the sun rising after an endless night. Without saying anything, she ran into his arms, and the millionaire lifted her up, spinning her in the air while they both laughed, a sound of pure liberation. Later, after putting her to bed, the millionaire went out on the balcony and looked at the stars. For the first time in 6 years, he felt truly at peace. The man who had destroyed his family would face justice. His daughter was safe. And together, they had begun to build something new from the ashes of the past. "We did it," he whispered to the night sky, imagining that maybe, somewhere beyond the stars, his wife could hear him. "I found our girl, and I promise that, from now on, every day will be better than the last." As if in response, a shooting star streaked across the sky, leaving a bright trail before disappearing on the horizon. The millionaire smiled, feeling tears of gratitude rolling down his face. No more tears of despair or anger, but of hope for the future they could finally build. 6 months had passed since Marcus's arrest. The life of the millionaire and his daughter had found a new rhythm, no longer dictated by fear or the urgency of survival, but by the deliberate joy of rediscovering the world together. On that sunny Sunday morning, the girl ran through the public park, chasing soap bubbles that her father blew into the air. Her laughter, once so rare, now echoed freely, attracting smiles from strangers who passed by. Texto adaptado. Watching her, the millionaire could hardly believe the transformation they had both undergone. The distrustful, silent little girl from the streets now attended a good school, had friends, participated in ballet and swimming lessons, and talked non-stop about her plans to become a veterinarian, to take care of all the abandoned animals in the world. As for himself, well, the cold, calculating man who lived only to accumulate more zeros in his bank account had been replaced by someone who now measured the success of his days by the number of smiles he could bring to his daughter's face. "Daddy, look how big this one is!" she shouted, chasing a particularly large bubble that reflected the rainbow in the sunlight. "I see it, Princess," he replied, marveling not at the bubble, but at the natural way she now called him Daddy, a word that months ago seemed like an impossible dream. After the park, They walked hand in hand to a nearby ice cream parlor, part of their Sunday ritual. The owner, a portly Italian-American with a white mustache, already knew them and started preparing their favorite flavors as soon as he spotted them through the window. "2 scoops for the prettiest pair in town," announced the man, handing a chocolate cone to the girl and a pistachio one to the millionaire. "Thank you, Mr. Esposito," she said, with the politeness she now cultivated with pride. Sitting on a park bench, savoring their ice cream and watching pigeons fight over crumbs, the girl suddenly grew serious. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course you can, honey, anything." She licked her ice cream thoughtfully before continuing. "Why did you decide to take care of me, even before you knew I was really your daughter?" The question caught the millionaire off guard. It was something he himself had pondered many times. "You know," he began, choosing his words carefully, "sometimes we meet people who touch our hearts in a way we can't explain. When I saw you at that shelter, so small but so strong, something inside me changed. Like a door I had locked a long time ago suddenly opened." The girl nodded, as if she understood perfectly. "I think my heart knew too." "How so?" "I never trusted anyone, ever," she explained with the direct sincerity of children. "But with you, it was different. Even though I was scared, a part of me wanted to trust." The millionaire swallowed hard, moved. "Maybe it was your heart recognizing something your mind couldn't know." "Like magic?" she asked, her eyes sparkling. "Like love," he corrected gently. "Love is stronger than any magic." Marcus's trial had taken place the previous month, resulting in an exemplary sentence. The discovery that he had not only orchestrated the kidnapping, but also attempted to eliminate evidence years later, had shocked even the most sensationalist press. The millionaire testified briefly, but spared his daughter that experience. Some wounds didn't need to be reopened. With the case closed and justice served, they could both finally look to the future without shadows of the past. One of the most significant decisions the millionaire had made was the creation of the New Beginnings Foundation, an organization dedicated to children in vulnerable situations, especially those separated from their families by tragic or unjust circumstances. The foundation not only provided shelter and education, but also used cutting-edge technology to help reunite separated families with DNA banks and sophisticated search systems. In just 6 months of operation, it had already reunited 4 children, with relatives who had been looking for them for years. "Can I go with you to the opening of the new house tomorrow?" asked the girl as they walked back to the car. "Are you sure? There will be a lot of people, reporters." She nodded, determined. "I want to see. It's important." The millionaire smiled, proud. His daughter understood, even so young, the importance of transforming her own pain into something that could help others. It was a wisdom that many adults never achieved. The next day, dressed in a blue dress chosen especially for the occasion, the girl held her father's hand as he cut the ribbon inaugurating the first New Beginnings shelter home, a space designed to look like a real home, not an institution, where children in vulnerable situations would receive not only basic care, but also individualized attention, therapy, and quality education. The reporters, who had previously chased them for sensationalism, now covered the event with evident respect. The story of father and daughter reunited after years of separation had captured the public's imagination, transforming from a scandal into an inspiration. A journalist approached cautiously after the ceremony. "Sir, could you comment on how it was to transform a personal tragedy into a project that will help so many children?" The millionaire looked at his daughter, who squeezed his hand in silent support. "I learned that the greatest wounds can become the greatest gifts if we allow it," he replied. "My daughter taught me that. She lost everything, lived on the streets, faced what no child should face, and yet found the strength to save a stranger's life. That stranger was me, her biological father, although neither of us knew it at the time." He paused, emotional. "What we are doing here today is just the beginning. There are thousands of children like her out there, intelligent, resilient, full of potential, just waiting for a chance. And there are families desperately looking for them. Our foundation exists to build bridges where there were only abysses before." At night, after an emotionally intense day, the millionaire tucked his daughter into bed. The room, which months before seemed so strange to her, was now completely personalized. The walls decorated with drawings made by herself, shelves full of books and toys, and photographs of special moments they had shared. "What did you think of the opening?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. She thought for a moment, her forehead furrowed in concentration. "It was good to see so many people wanting to help," she replied finally, "but I was sad thinking about the children who are still alone." "That's why we'll keep working," he assured her. "One day at a time, one child at a time." "Dad," she said, suddenly serious, "can I tell you a secret?" "Of course, honey." "Sometimes when we were at the shelter and you left, I was afraid you wouldn't come back. Even wanting to trust, I was scared." The confession broke his heart. "Oh, honey." "But now I'm not anymore," she continued, her eyes shining in the dim light of the room. "Now I know you'll always come back." "Always," he promised, his voice choked with emotion. "As long as I live, I'll always be by your side." She smiled, satisfied, and hugged the teddy bear she never let out of her bed, one of the first gifts he had given her. "You know what?" she said, already half asleep. "I think Mommy is happy now." The millionaire felt silent tears roll down his face. "I think so, honey, I think so." When she finally fell asleep, the millionaire remained by her side for a few more minutes, just watching the miracle that was his daughter. He thought about all the events that had to happen, some terrible, others wonderful, for them to reach this moment. He thought about the street kid who, even though she had nothing, offered everything to save the life of a stranger. He thought about how, by a twist of fate, or perhaps something deeper, that child was his own lost daughter. And he thought about how sometimes we need to lose everything to rediscover what really matters. Rising carefully so as not to wake her, the millionaire walked to the window and looked at the starry sky. Somewhere, beyond that infinite expanse of shining dots, was his wife, the woman he had loved deeply and whose absence had left a void he had tried to fill with power and money. "Thank you," he whispered to the stars. "Thank you for bringing her back to me." The next day, while they were having breakfast on the sunny porch, the girl asked something she had been considering for weeks. "Can we visit where Mommy is?" The millionaire paused, the coffee cup suspended in the air. He had visited his wife's grave religiously every year on the anniversary of the tragedy, a solitary and somber pilgrimage that marked the most painful day of his life. But he had never considered taking his daughter. "Do you really want to go?" he asked gently. She nodded, biting into a toast. "I want to bring flowers and tell her we're together now." The next afternoon, hand in hand, father and daughter walked among the well-kept graves of the memorial cemetery. The place was serene, with old trees providing shade and birds singing among the branches, more a garden than a traditional graveyard. The girl carried a bouquet of white lilies, her mother's favorite flowers, as her father had explained. When they reached the simple but elegant marble headstone, she carefully placed the flowers at the base and stepped back. "Hi, Mommy," she said, with a naturalness that surprised the millionaire. "I brought you flowers. Daddy said you liked these." He stood a little behind, giving her space for this intimate moment. Silent tears streamed down his face as he watched his daughter talking to the mother she had never consciously known. "I wanted to tell you that we're okay now," she continued. "Daddy found me, even when everyone thought I had gone to heaven with you too. It took us a long time, but now we're together." She paused, adjusting a flower that had fallen sideways. "He talks about you every day. He shows me pictures and tells me stories about you both. He says, I have your smile and your stubborn streak." She smiled to herself. "I think he's right." The millionaire choked back a sob, not wanting to interrupt this moment with his emotion. It was as if a circle was finally closing. His daughter, whom he had believed lost, now connecting with the mother she had never known. "I promise to take care of him," said the girl in an almost confidential tone. "Sometimes he gets sad, but I'm teaching him to smile more, and I promise to study hard and be brave, like you both." Finally, she turned to her father and held out her hand. He approached and knelt beside her, before the grave of the woman they both loved in different ways. "We're rebuilding our family," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Not the way we planned, but still, it's our family. I wish you could see the amazing person our daughter has become. You would be so proud." The girl rested, her head on his shoulder, a simple gesture of comfort that said more than any words. They stayed like that for a long time, the three of them reunited in a way that transcended the barriers between life and death. On the way back home, the girl was thoughtful, looking out the car window at the city passing by. "What are you thinking about?" asked the millionaire. "About all the children who are still waiting," she replied, without taking her eyes off the window. "Like I was waiting." The millionaire felt that familiar pang in his heart, a mixture of pride and pain for the hard-won wisdom his daughter had acquired so early in life. "You know," she continued, "maybe we can find other kids like me who lost their families but don't know it. That's exactly what we're trying to do with the foundation," he assured her. "But I can help more," she insisted, turning to face him with determination. "I can talk to the new kids who arrive. They'll trust me more because I know what it's like." The millionaire reflected on the proposal. It was true that his daughter possessed a unique understanding of the situation of these children, an empathy that no adult, however well-intentioned, could offer. "I think it's a wonderful idea," he finally agreed. "As long as it's at the right times and doesn't interfere with your studies and play," she smiled, satisfied at being taken seriously. In the following weeks, this idea took shape. With the careful guidance of child psychologists, the girl began to participate occasionally in activities at the shelter home. Not as a formal counselor, but as a special friend who had gone through similar experiences. The impact was immediate and profound. Children who refused to talk to adults opened up to her. Through games and simple conversations, she built bridges that the most experienced professionals could not establish. "It's extraordinary," commented the director of the house after one of the visits. "She has a natural gift." The millionaire watched with pride this new role that his daughter had assumed. She was not just the beneficiary of a rescue. She was an active agent of change, transforming her own traumatic experience into a tool to help others. 1 year after their reunion, on an autumn afternoon, the millionaire and his daughter walked through the same alley where it had all begun. The place was different now, cleaner, brighter, part of an urban revitalization project that he himself had sponsored. The girl stopped exactly at the spot where, a year earlier, she had found a stranger lying among garbage bags. "It was here," she said, looking around as if she could see the past superimposed on the present. "Yes," he confirmed, holding her hand. "It was here that you saved my life. I didn't know it was you, that it was my dad. But even so, you helped." she shrugged, in a gesture reminiscent of the distrustful little girl she had once been. You were still breathing. The simplicity of that explanation, the same one she had given a year earlier, still moved him deeply. You were still breathing, as if that was reason enough to care, to help, to risk herself. You know, said the millionaire, kneeling to get to her eye level, I think you saved me twice. How so? That day, you saved my body, but later, when we got to know each other better, you saved something much more important. What? My heart, he replied, touching his own chest. I was alive, but I wasn't really living. You taught me to love again, to care, to see beyond the numbers and the money. The girl smiled, no longer the cautious and distrustful smile of their first encounters, but a full, radiant smile of confidence and happiness. Then we saved each other, she concluded, with perfect childlike logic. Exactly, he agreed, hugging her, and we'll continue saving each other every day for the rest of our lives. Hand in hand, they left the alley behind, walking towards the future they were building together, day after day. No longer as the millionaire and the street kid, but as father and daughter, two souls whom fate separated only to reunite in an even more meaningful way. Because sometimes it's those who have nothing who have the most to offer, and those who have everything find their true purpose only when they learn to let go of control and embrace the unpredictable, wonderful, and frightening power of love. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day.